Welcome to Xbox Corner. Today we're going to be taking a look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and specifically the campaign mode. All the footage is 4K and captured on a Series X, and we'll be looking into story, gameplay, graphics and audio. So with that, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals, graphical comparisons and Game Pass breakdowns weekly, and let's get started. The story then sees the return of many fan favourite characters, notably Ghost and Soap, though the game of course will have us controlling multiple characters throughout on what is a war against terrorism. The story is a little more grounded than many of the recent series entries, but that I liked. It's made it a favourite story for the series in recent memory. The core concept is this: we uncover that American missiles have been acquired by certain organisations and we must now stop them before they fire on us. Along the way they'll expect everything from double crossings to drug lords to moments where we must infiltrate bunkers undercover. By the end game it goes all out action and Hollywood of course, but it's definitely a fun ride. There's also just some great characters to meet along the way. Gameplay then, and while it's not breaking any new ground, it's definitely trying some new things for Call of Duty, and some of them pay off, others not so much. The gunplay is, however, as strong as ever. There's a slew of weapons to pick up along the way, and that's going to be everything from stealth options with silencers or think blades, to those that can literally level buildings. Alongside the weapons as well, there's a huge amount of accessories and let's call them support options. Think heartbeat monitors, grenades, different types of scope. The fifth difficulty option then, that is known as realism. We unlock this on campaign completion at any difficulty. The mission variety though, generally good stuff. We have everything from tactical and night missions to stealth moments to areas where we find ourselves boarding, different ships at sea. The mix definitely keeps things entertaining, and they've clearly tried to replicate series history with many of the highlights holding, similarity to past games. This is particularly true of a ghillie suit mission, which has you sneaking through enemies and sniping from a distance. Yet again they fail to reach the magic that was the experience first time around, but it's a decent effort and it has its moments. The main complaint I have about the missions though, generally, some of them simply feel just, overlong. It actually took me around 7 hours to get through the game, which is long in comparison to many of the past entries, but I have walked away here feeling like they could have probably trimmed the fat. If it's not repeating many of the same ideas, it's simply dragging out the scale of some of the locations. Sniping, for example, is extremely fun, but it replays a range scenario more than a few times in a row and it just kind of feels like padding. Then some of the additions to gameplay as well I like. Thinking outside the gunplay, we pilot a missile in the opening moments, we have the classic aerial support missions, we have some creative environments. Think a ship where crates are moving, meaning your cover is on the move. It so happens it can also crush you. It also has a water sequence where you're flowing downstream, and the force means you're never actually able to stop still, adding just a dash of challenge to the gunplay. Sadly though then, the sequences where you can respond during interrogations, get it wrong, it's going to be insta-death. This could have simply been a cutscene, it just doesn't feel necessary. Then there's a car chase sequence and helicopter moment which is completely dragged out, and the mechanics, honestly, they just feel weak. The car moments, for example, are the idea you're chasing an enemy, you'll be driving and hanging at the side to fire, and I know that sounds awesome, but it just doesn't really translate the fun gameplay. Basically, you can't do both at the same time, so you're either driving or shooting, which means the car is constantly slowing down. Other traffic on the road is quite glitchy as well, and occasionally you need to climb on the roof and jump to another car, and it just feels weak. I was constantly falling off, dying, or the button inputs, the response time just didn't quite feel like it was up to the task, nor did it have the accuracy. There's a mountainside, in fact, early in the game that has us jumping as well, and it's weak there too. It's like you're gonna fall to your death, and it's just not a necessary addition. It just doesn't really feel like it falls into the scope of Call of Duty gameplay. That said though, I do respect they've come here with the idea of changing the formula just slightly, and in some moments that works, helping in disarming locations via input. The dialogue actually in-game, giving you response options, it makes you feel more involved, and while piloting the missile it feels a little weird, I can't deny the Hollywood action vibe to it all, and it absolutely worked. Even the helicopter sequence that I mentioned, you're actually going to be dangling upside down shooting, and look, sure, it's all on rails outside of you aiming, but I cannot deny that action element really does appeal. I also enjoyed a brief walk in what I'd call a stealth mission through the streets of Amsterdam. Overall, I had fun. They took some risks, they don't all work, but it's one of the more interesting entries for Call of Duty, and it's good to see these teams push towards adding a little variety to things. They clearly are extremely talented, let's face it, and if this is a sign of things to come, then I will say I think it's going in the right direction. Graphically then, it's stunning for the majority, and that was of course expected given the size of the budget behind these. It's just incredible though, the character design, the locations, the texture work, it's clear the amount of work that's been put in. I was particularly impressed with the lighting effects as well, and it's clear they agree because the opening few missions, they are all set at night. There's a slew of options in here as well for the visuals. Think on-demand texture streaming, world and weapon motion blur, film grain, depth of field, so think a blur to what is not in focus, field of view options, sharpness enhancement, and camera movement. I jumped between the depth of field options but left everything else as standard. Problems, not a huge amount, some minor clipping occasionally with enemies through walls. I did notice without the depth of field you see some lower quality textures up close, think crawling through the grass in the ghillie suit mission. Occasionally enemies and vehicles, the physics can get a little weird, especially on death, think ragdoll like responses. And also then finally the depth of field, I will say just occasionally the blur didn't feel like it was in the right place. That's why I was kind of jumping between it being on and off. So audio and the voice acting, incredibly well done, with some great delivery, and the gunplay and the world effects, everything you would expect from a AAA release. I did on occasion notice some weird balancing, like on the ocean indoors, the sound of waves would disappear entirely, even though the doors and the windows, they're clearly open. And car effects as well, the engine would occasionally disappear. Minor quirks though that a quick patch will fix, and it's topped off then with the expected Hollywood-like soundtrack. It's got some good moments for the music as well, but overall I'd call it as doing what it needs to. It reinforces the stakes of the scenario, whether that's you're a one-man killing machine or you're simply trying to survive. So the final verdict in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the campaign, it takes some risks which don't always pay off, but it feels like a good direction for the series with some absolute highlights. The levels, they do feel a little long in places, and there's a few, like the car sequence, I would just remove them entirely, or at least rethink how it all works. The controls are just not up to Uncharted style leaping between cars. That said though, I think fans will be happy. It's the usual Hollywood affair with action that builds throughout with great gunplay. It's also the most enjoyable story I've seen in a long time from Call of Duty, mainly down to the fact, honestly, it starts a little more grounded and then builds from there. Also for me, just the return of Ghost and Soap, they are always incredible characters. Today then, it's a good 7 out of 10 from me. I had fun, it has flaws, but it's a little different, which actually makes it feel like they're going beyond the usual copy and paste. And honestly, good for them, I'm absolutely here for it. Will you be checking it out then? Let me know in the comments. With that then, Will you be checking it out? Let me know in the comments. With that then, hit subscribe. Join us here for reviews, deals, graphical comparisons, and Game Pass breakdowns of weekly. And I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.